Hello students and welcome to today's lesson, A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise by Rabindranath Tagore, Part 2. This lesson is presented by Dr. P.V. Geeta Lakshmi Patnaik, Associate Professor of English, BJR Government Degree College, Narayanguda, Hyderabad. In the previous lesson, we had seen what this story is all about. We had also looked at a very brief introduction to the writer Rabindranath Tagore. We had also looked at the introduction to the story, and we have also taken a look at the plot structure. But in order to take a quick recap, let us look at the following things. Fine arts are creative arts whose products are to be appreciated primarily or solely for their imaginative, aesthetic, or intellectual content. So the present story advocates the belief that true art needs no justification, it is valuable as art, and the only objective of art is the pursuit of pure beauty. So A Wrong Man in Workers' Paradise is one of Rabindranath Tagore's best known stories. And it narrates the story of an artist who spends his time on earth doing trivial tasks like painting, sculpting, etc., and upon his death is sent by mistake to workers' paradise, which is a heaven for the truly hardworking. But then what happens? The arrival of the idle man in workers' paradise gives rise to many complications which form the crux of the story. So very quickly, let us look at the plot structure. Generally, a short story or a novel follows this kind of a plot. And we begin with the exposition, which is the beginning of the story, where characters and setting are introduced. And then there is the rising action, where the main character faces a series of conflicts. And this brings us to the climax, which is the most exciting part of the story when we learn the outcome. And then the falling action, which is a reference to the events leading to the end of the story. And finally, the resolution or the end of the story. So very quickly, let us look at the first part of the story that we have already discussed in the previous lesson. The man had never believed in mere utility. Having had no useful work, he indulged in mad whims. He made little pieces of sculpture, men, women, and castles, quaint earthen things, dotted over with seashells. He painted. Thus he wasted his time on all that was useless and unnecessary. People laughed at him. At times, he would vow to shake off his whims, but they would keep clinging to his mind. Some boys never plied their books and yet passed their examinations. A similar thing happened to this man. He spent all his life in unnecessary work on the planet Earth, yet after his death, the gates of the heavens flung open for him. So we have already discussed this in the previous session, but I would just like to bring your attention to, direct your attention to a few words that we have in these lines, in these passages. So the man had never believed in mere utility. In fact, he did not, the narrator says that he had no useful work and therefore he indulged in many mad whims or strange desires, unusual desires. And what did he do? He made sculptures and he painted and he wasted all his time on things that were useless and unnecessary. And naturally, people laughed at him. People around him laughed at him. And so he would at times promise himself that he would shake off his whims, but then they would keep clinging to his mind because he was an artist. He couldn't do anything other than sculpting and painting and other artistic things. And so what happened was that even though the narrator says he has spent all his time, all his life in unnecessary work, after his death, he was taken to heaven directly. Now, let us see what happens. I shall read the lesson now, the story. But the moving finger writes even in the heavens. So it came to pass that the aerial messenger who took charge of the man made a mistake and found a place for him in workers' paradise. In this paradise, you find everything except leisure. Here, men say, God, we haven't a moment to spare. Women whisper, let's move on, times are flying. All exclaim, "Time is precious. We have our hands full. We make use of every single minute," they sigh complainingly. And yet, those very words make them feel happy and exalted. The moving finger is a reference to fate or destiny. And so, what happens in the story is that the aerial messenger, who is in charge of taking dead people or people who die and pass on to the next world, he is in charge of taking them to heaven or hell or wherever he has to escort them to their respective destinations. But what happens here is that in the story, the aerial messenger makes a mistake, and he takes the idle man to the workers' paradise. And there is a description of the kind of people who stay, who are who are in this workers' paradise. So here you find everything, says the narrator, except leisure. There's no free time for anybody. So men are always rushing, and they don't have a moment to spare. Similarly, the women also are aware that time is flying, and so they have to move on. They have to do their work. So everybody unanimously says time is precious, and in fact, they also complain that they have too much work to do. But then the narrator says that this is not a real complaint, because these very words make them feel happy and exalted. He tells us that the narrator, in not so many words, tells us that the people here in the workers' paradise enjoy working. They love their work. In fact, they do not want leisure at all. Next. But this newcomer, who had passed all his life on earth without any employment, did not fit in with the scheme of things in workers' paradise. He lounged in the streets absent-mindedly and jostled with hurrying men. He lay down in the green meadows and was taken to task by busy farmers. He was always in the way of others. So it's easy to see why this newcomer was not able to fit in with the scheme of things in workers' paradise. Everybody in the workers' paradise was always rushing around, always busy. On the other hand, here you have the newcomer, the idle man, who had never done anything useful on earth and who had no employment as such in workers' paradise. So this man could not adjust, he could not blend with the others in this place. And so he lounged in the streets absent-mindedly. He was always coming in the way of others. And as people would hurry by, he would push against them or bump into them. And when he had no peace in the busy world, in the streets of this busy world, he went down to the green meadows and tried to lay down there. But even there, he was taken to task by busy farmers, because they couldn't understand how a person could just while away his time doing nothing important. And this idle man was always in the way of others. And then there is the introduction of a young girl. So let us see what happens. A bustling, active girl went every day to a silent torrent. Silent, for in the workers' paradise, even a torrent did not waste its energy singing to fill her pitcher with water. A bustling, active girl went every day to a silent torrent to fill her pitcher with water. The unemployed man was standing by the fountain motionless. As a princess sees a lonely beggar and is filled with pity, the busy girl of heaven saw the unemployed man and was filled with pity. "Aha," she said, "you haven't any work in hand, have you?" The man sighed. "Work? I haven't a moment to spare for work." The girl did not understand his words, so she said, "I may manage to spare some work for you if you like." So this is the introduction of the the bustling active girl. So look at the adjectives that are used for the girl. She's bustling, she's active, which is a total contrast to the unemployed man who is inactive, who is idle, and who is standing motionless by the torrent. And the writer uses irony here. So he says that the torrent is silent because in workers' paradise, even a torrent did not waste its energy singing. So generally, any other story would have spoken about how water which is flowing very fast was making some music or noise. But here in this story, the torrent makes no noise at all, because this noise does not have any purpose. And so the young girl looks at the unemployed man, and then she feels pity for him, and she asks him whether he doesn't have any work at hand. And so the man says that I haven't a moment to spare for work. This is a statement which the girl does not understand at first, because she has never come across anybody who does not have work. And so she says, I may manage to spare some work for you if you like. So she thinks that maybe he's in need of some work, and so she says, I shall give you some of my work if you want. But then what happens next? The man replied, Girl of the silent torrent, all this time I have been waiting here only to take some work from your hands. So she asked, What sort of work would you like? He said, Girl of the silent torrent, couldn't you give me one of your pictures, one which you could spare? She asked, A picture? Perhaps you should like to draw water from the torrent? He replied, No, I shall draw pictures on your picture. The girl became annoyed and said, I have no time to waste on people such as you. I'm going. And away she went. But how could a busy man get the better of one who had nothing to do? Every day they met, and every day he said to her, Girl of the silent torrent, give me one of your pictures. I shall draw pictures on it. So, students, as we can see, um, the man asks her to give her picture so that he can do some painting on it. So he asks her for the picture, but then she's surprised because she thinks that he's asking it because he wants to draw some water from the torrent. But the man says that no, he wants to draw pictures on a picture. And this annoys the girl because she has never heard of such a thing before. And so she says that she has no time to waste and she leaves the place. But then, as the writer says, how could a busy person get the better of one who had nothing to do? Because this person who has nothing to do has all the time to keep pestering somebody in order to convince them. So every day, whenever they would meet, the idle man would tell the girl to give her one of her pictures so that he can draw pictures on it. At last, she had to give way and hand him over one of her pictures. The man began to paint on it. He drew line after line, he put color after color. When he had finished, the girl held up the picture and stared at its side with eyes filled with wonder. Then, brows drawn into an arch, she asked, What do they mean? All these lines and all these colors, and what is their purpose? The man laughed. Nothing. A picture never has any meaning and it never serves any purpose. So what happens is that the girl gives him a picture and then he paints on it. Look at how beautiful the pot or picture would look like after all the painting has been completed. And so when she looks at it, she is filled with wonder because she cannot understand what all these lines and all these colors mean. And so she asks him, what do they mean? And what is the purpose? And look at the reply that the man gives. Nothing, he laughs. A picture never has any meaning and it never serves any purpose, he says. And the girl went away with the picture. At home, away from prying eyes, she held it in the light, turned it round and round, and scanned the painting from all angles. At night, she left her bed, lit a lamp, and scanned it again in silence and wonder. For the first time in her life, she had seen something that had no meaning and no purpose at all. When she set out for the torrent the next day, her hurrying feet were a little less hurrying than before, for in her mind thoughts had arisen, thoughts that had no meaning and no purpose at all. So this is the climax of the story, students. So we have to, please pay a lot of attention here, because what happens is the girl goes away with her picture, and once she reaches home, she looks at the picture with wonder because she cannot understand what this picture is all about. She turns it round and round and scans it from all angles. And at night, she's unable to sleep. And so she wakes up, lights a lamp, and scans it again in silence and wonder. Because this is the first time in her life that she has seen something that has no meaning and no purpose at all. And the influence of this painting on the picture is so great on her that when she leaves home the next day and goes to the torrent, her hurrying feet were a little less hurrying than before. She was not the same person that she was before. In her mind, thoughts had arisen, thoughts that had no meaning and no purpose at all. Look at the way how Tagore keeps repeating these words, no meaning and no purpose. And so, what happens next? She saw the unemployed man standing by the torrent and she asked confusedly, But what? What do you want from me? He said, only some more work from your hands. And what sort of work would you like? Let me weave a colored ribbon for your hair if you will. And what for? Ribbons were made, gleaming with colors. The busy girl of workers' paradise had to now spend a long time every day in tying the colored ribbon round her hair. The minutes slid by unutilized, much work was left unfinished. So, as you can see, students, the girl has changed. There is a very significant change in the girl. So the next day when she goes to the torrent and she sees the unemployed man there, she is very confused and she asks him, what do you want from me? So the man says that he wants some more work from her. And when she is unable to give him any work, he tells her that he will weave a colored ribbon for her hair. And she is unable to understand why he would do such a thing. However, the unemployed man, the idle man, makes the ribbons which are gleaming with colors, and the girl goes home with these ribbons. And the busy girl of workers' paradise now spends a long time every day. She ties the colored ribbon round her hair, and without even realizing it, the minutes just go by unutilized. She doesn't use it for anything important. And so a lot of work was left unfinished. So these lines tell us that the man's influence is so profound, so great on the girl that she has changed. She is no longer the same person that she was before. Now she's spending a lot of time looking at the paintings and tying colored ribbons in her hair. And so a lot of work is also left unfinished. And so what happens in the community? In workers' paradise, work had of late begun to suffer. Many persons who had been active before were now idle, wasting their precious moments on unnecessary things such as painting and sculpture. The elders became anxious. A meeting was called. All agreed that such a thing had so far been unknown in the history of workers' paradise. The aerial messenger hurried in, bowed before the elders, and made a confession. I brought a wrong man into this paradise, he said. It is all due to him. And so we can see how the elders in the workers' paradise are all worried because many people who were active before have now become idle. And what are they doing? They are wasting their precious moments on unnecessary things such as painting and sculpture. These lines are a repetition of what was said at the beginning of the story in connection with the idle man. So he was also supposed to have wasted his precious time on unnecessary things such as painting and sculpture. So now it's easy to see that the people in workers' paradise have been influenced by the idle man. So the elders became anxious and a meeting was called, and all of them agreed that never had such a thing happened before. And what happens next is that the aerial messenger comes in and he makes a confession and he tells them that he has brought a wrong man into this paradise and all this is happening because of him. So everybody is happy that they have found a solution to the problem. And so the man was summoned, he came in. The elders saw his fantastic dress, his quaint brushes, his pile of paintings, and they realized at once that he was not the right sort for workers' paradise. Stiffly, the president said, this is no place for the like of you. Therefore, you will have to leave at once. The man sighed in great relief and gathered up his brush and paint. But as he was about to leave, the girl of the silent torrent came up tripping and cried, wait a moment, for I too will go with you. The elders gasped in surprise. Never before had a thing like this happened in workers' paradise, a thing that had no meaning and no purpose at all. So students, as we can see, when the man entered the place where the elders were all sitting, he was completely different from all of them. The elders see his fantastic dress, his very strange, quaint, strange brushes, and his paintings, and all of them realize that this was not the sort of person who should stay in workers' paradise. And so the president tells him that he has to leave immediately. Naturally, the man is relieved because he never wanted to be there in the first place. And gathering up his brush and paint as he was about to leave, something very surprising happens. And the girl of the silent torrent comes up to him and says, wait a moment, for I too will go with you. And this is something that is very surprising to the elders in the gathering, because never had such a thing happened before in the workers' paradise, a thing that had no meaning and no purpose at all. the narrator keeps repeating this over and over again. So this is something that had never happened before. Never, never, ever had a person left workers' paradise in order to go and follow a person who was supposed to be doing nothing at all. So none of the people there were able to understand how and why such a thing had happened. So students, let us quickly look at the plot structure. As we have seen, it begins with the exposition where we had the introduction of the idle man, his preoccupation with painting and sculptures, and his death and arrival in the workers' paradise. Then the part of the story which comes under rising action describes the unsuitability of the idle man in the workers' paradise, and it also describes the encounters with the young girl. And the climax of the story comes midway, where we can see how the influence of the idle man's painting changes the attitude of the girl. And from there onwards, there is a falling action where we see the gradual change in the girl's attitude and the change in the attitudes of the other people. And finally, the last part, which is a resolution, it is the in the resolution, we find the departure of the idle man from the workers' paradise and its consequences. So we see how the busy girl decides to follow the idle man, and how all the people in workers' paradise are totally surprised and amazed that such a thing can ever happen. So some other points that we can remember in the story. So very quickly, the setting. The story is set on the earth at the beginning of the story, and at the beginning, and then the action moves to the workers' paradise, which is a heaven for the hardworking. Then coming to the characters, there are two main characters, two primary characters, and they are the idle man and the young girl. And we also have many secondary characters like the aerial messenger, the people around the idle man on earth, and the people in the workers' paradise. And there's a lot of, there's a great use of irony in the story, because Tagore uses words like paradise, which is meant to be, which is meant to be a word which we have to think about. We have to, the readers have to ask themselves a question whether this is truly a paradise and a place, because it is a place where people don't have any kind of leisure, people have no time for any art or literature, and people are always busy. And there's also a lot of irony used in the during the references, the various references to in the various references to the man as an idler, as being somebody who is unemployed, as a person who has nothing to do. So all these things are used, all these references are used ironically by Tagore. So the central idea in the story is actually related to the famous slogan, "Art for Art's sake," which was a slogan of the 19th century, a major artistic movement in the 19th century. And this slogan expresses the idea that true art need not serve any specific purpose. Art is valuable as art. So thank you, students. I hope you understood the story and you enjoyed it. Thank you.